by the time you're seeing this, the Princeton event will have happened. I sat through for the final rehearsals day. It's amazing, actually. It's a staged reading, and I thought I was going to be bored because I think I've seen the play now
A lot.
a lot,
Yes.
and
Yes.
it moved me. It moved me listening to the people. It really, really moved me.
Hello and welcome to the Anne and Phelim Scoop with me, Anne McElhenney, all on my lonesome because Phelim is on his way to Princeton, where the first performance on campus of the October 7th play is about to happen. And by the time actually you're getting to watch this podcast, it'll have happened. And what we'll do is we'll put up some footage and some reactions from Princeton in the letter that we send out. So if you're on our mailing list, you'll get that. But anyway, despite that, he is going to join us. Phelim will join me later in the podcast to kind of tell me all about how they're getting on over there. And while the pro-abortion people like to negatively paint post-Roe America, the truth of the matter is that US abortion law as it stands is extraordinarily extreme. And I feel like it's a story that it's one of those stories that I've felt really strongly about. And I just want to focus a little bit on that today during this podcast, because I think sometimes people don't realize exactly what the laws are in the places that they're living in themselves. And I think it's worth taking a moment. And we have a story of extraordinary anti-Semitism at the very, very highest level in Ireland. Really quite extraordinary. And we'll be joined by Fatima Gunning, who's a journalist for Gript in Ireland, to talk about that. But the first thing I want to do is I want to talk about these extraordinary abortion laws in the United States of America. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by showing you a couple of maps. So this first map I want to show you is from the Guttmacher Institute. And the Guttmacher Institute, as you probably know, is the think tank or the intellectual, side of the abortion corporation of Planned Parenthood, basically. And they're obviously very pro-abortion. And it's interesting how they present these maps. So I kind of thought a lot of these maps are created, and the New York Times have done a whole series of maps as well. And I think we need our own maps because their maps hide a lot of very interesting information. But if you look at this map, so much about this map I find really interesting. So everything that you see that's lavender, those kind of lavender shades that you can see on that map, is called most protective. Most protective. You think of the word protective, it's exactly the opposite. Those are the places where there are no restrictions on abortion at all. Those places. And I thought it was interesting that they chose the colour lavender. And I looked up, what does lavender symbolise? So interesting. Lavender is a beautiful and calming colour, I read, used throughout history to evoke femininity, gentleness, relaxation and tranquility, which is hardly really the colour you would like to use to describe places where you can have an abortion up to 9 months for absolutely any reason. So instead, I want to look at our map, the map we've created. So look at this map now, and I've coloured it red because I think that that's actually much more appropriate. So in those states there, Oregon, Alaska, New Mexico, Colorado, Minnesota, Michigan, Maine, Vermont, New Jersey, Maryland, you can see them there. 10 states, basically. In those 10 states, plus Washington, D.C., plus the District of Washington, D.C., you can have an abortion for any reason up to 9 months. And last week we showed you that incredible video from Students for Life with a young woman phoning up an abortion clinic in Maryland and basically saying, I'm 34 weeks pregnant. And the answer at the end of the phone is zero problem, no questions asked, come in, it's going to take 4 days or whatever it was, she said. Extraordinary. But I just think that, let's look at that map again. I just think it's extraordinary. And then to add to that map, because this again is the story that's not being told and the story that I think is worth, I've really wanted to highlight this for quite a while and I hope I'm doing a good job of it. Here's another set. So here's a second map I want to show you. So in this second map, these are states where, according to the law, you can have an abortion up to viability, but the law does not define what viability is. So that's the doctor can decide what viability is. And after viability, at the if the doctor thinks it's necessary for the life of the mother, the mental health, whatever. Very vague, incredibly vague. So basically, you can add those states to places where you can have an abortion up to 9 months as well. This turns out to be a lot of America. Basically, it turns out to be, when you add them all up together, it's places where 140 million people live. About 140 million people live in places where you can have an abortion up to 9 months. It's about a third of the country. So when you then combine those two maps, look at this map now. So this is a kind of a very different map. And what's really interesting to me about this map is you can have an abortion up to 9 months in all the places where most people live. In the most populous parts of the United States, it's where these extraordinary laws exist. And where else in the world do those laws exist? Very few places. North Korea, China, um, Canada, of course, by the way, which also has extraordinary laws and also, of course, has euthanasia that's kind of running completely out of control. And we're going to talk about that another day. But I just think it's worth having a look at these maps. I'm going to flick back through them again, looking at the first one again, where it's legal to have an abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason at all. Maybe you live in one of these places and maybe you just didn't know about it. But I love I just love the fact that the pro-abortion side just love to use the most extraordinary language, most protective. So instead of saying the most dangerous place for a little baby in the womb, instead of saying that, they call those places most protective and color them in lavender. Just extraordinary. But then, remember that these are the people who instead of calling Planned Parenthood what it should be, which is, Abortion Corporation Central, they call it Planned Parenthood. So they're the kings and queens of euphemisms. They talk about, instead of saying dead baby, they say product of conception, products of conception. Instead of saying, kill, which is what abortion is, they say termination. And then, of course, they call abortion healthcare. Healthcare, you need healthcare if you're sick. People who are pregnant are not sick. They're not at all ill. There's nothing wrong with them. So why would you need healthcare? It's just, this is this inversion of language it's just horrific. But we're going to be joined now. We're going to go on and be joined now by Phelim to talk about what's happening at Princeton. So let's go over to that interview now. There you are, Phelim.
Hello.
Hello. So you're on the road, Phelim.
In the mean streets of New York City, yes, indeed.
On your way to Princeton. So this is going to be.
I'm in a theater rehearsal space where there's a musical parody of Friends on at night, but we're in this rehearsal space. It's the final rehearsal before Princeton, which we're recording this. By the time you're seeing this, the Princeton event will have happened. I sat through for the final rehearsals day. It's amazing, actually. It's a staged reading, and I thought I was going to be bored because I think I've seen the play now
a lot.
Yes. And
yes.
It moved me. It moved me listening to the people. It really, really moved me. So
and so you've a new. And so now you've a new cast, Phelim, right? We've got a different cast than we had the original cast that we had in New York. Now this is a whole new set of players. So tell me what particularly struck you? What moved you? Because this is, as you said, this is different. This isn't a full stage performance. This is a stage reading, but it's extraordinary because in the end, what's really powerful about the play, and we've said this so often, is that these are the words of the people that we interviewed in Israel. And those words and those memories and that testimony is so powerful.
Yeah, well, it's called October 7. We went there after October 7 to interview the people because nobody else was going to do it, and everyone wanted to talk about Gaza. So yeah, there is one actress who was in the original play, Leonora, who plays Ayelet, and Jeff, of course, who played Zaki, is the director now. So so there's a little bit of historical memory. And interesting, we had a table read of the play back the first time we came to New York, just with some actors, and one of the actresses exists from that. So there's a bit of historical memory. It's very interesting. Some of the players actually bear more of a physical resemblance to the actual people than the other actors did.
Oh, interesting.
so Michal Bilia, the actress, actually looks a lot more like Michal Bilia than the actress Lynn, who played Michal at the time in the off Broadway show. Um, uh, Asaf, the nice guy, the guy who studies philosophy and music, who wants to phone the girl he loves. The guy who plays him is softer, like Asaf was in real life. So it's very interesting to see all their different interpretations. I mean, of course, these actors, every word, they can give a meaning to every word, every little nuance, and some of them are playing it differently. And they have a director, so I'm trying to stay out of it. And It's just amazing to see how they take the words you know and get so close to the actual how it was said at the time, and how I remember it being said at the time, without ever knowing these people,
Amazing.
because they're these actors, they're smart that way.
Just amazing. No, it's fantastic. And it's interesting. I was at an event here in Los Angeles over the weekend with
Uh-huh.
some speakers talking about Israel, talking about the situation there. And what was really interesting to me was one of the speakers who talked about the displaced people, and it reminded me, Phelim, of so many people that we interviewed who
Yes,
were not speaking to us in their own home. They were speaking they were either in somebody else's home. So a lot of people, and I was remembering as well, you remember when we went to see Douglas Murray film, and the hotel he was
yes,
staying at in Tel Aviv, and it was exactly what this guy was talking about at this event I went to, where that hotel, and that was in November, by the way. That
that's
was
right.
weeks afterwards, but the hotel was overrun. Douglas Murray's hotel was overrun with refugees who had come in from
Families.
northern Israel, right, Philip?
Yes, and I remember Douglas was kind of rambling on at the time, and kind of going, the untold story, the story that nobody's focusing on, is the northern border, because he was in the hotel and he could see the tens of thousands of people who had been displaced,
Yeah,
and that's a massive. I mean,
it's a massive
they
story.
say 60,000, and it's a massive story, like that.
Yeah,
That I mean, displaced is not even the word either, because
no,
they were driven from their homes by indiscriminate rocket attacks.
yeah, yeah.
And that's the context
And that's the
of
context of the people. Yeah, that's the context
of
of
the
the people.
pagers.
Yeah, and that's the context. But well, it's also the context of the people that are in the play, that people will get to hear. The people that go to Princeton that will hear will see the performance in Princeton. Obviously, we're going to also have a performance in UCLA on October 7th. But
That's right.
what was amazing it was just amazing to me, because as I said, sometimes you hear people talk about Israel, and then they don't, they're kind of saying things that, and maybe they haven't really been there, or don't
Yes,
really know the story. But this guy was very interesting, because he was basically saying all that stuff, and I was and he mentioned Ofakim, where a lot of the characters in our play are from, and how
yes,
people, how their houses have been destroyed, and how one point he made was how important it would be that once things get safe in that Gaza envelope area, that
yes,
people would come back. They said he was saying how important it is that people would come back to their own home,
yes.
and if you like, in some ways, reestablish the border, was kind of one of the
Yeah.
things that he was saying. But
Well,
I just
well,
thought it
well,
was go on.
no, that's. I mean, that's the point about the northern border as well. By the way, you know, the idea that these pager attacks are some kind of escalation, they're not. It's a defensive move. Like, I think it's, they say 60,000, but Douglas Murray was clear. There's more than they're saying, right?
Yes.
That 60,000 is the registered amount of displaced people,
Yeah.
but lots more have left. There's whole empty towns and villages on the northern border. Hezbollah has redrawn the Israeli border, like, and so, by the way, has Hamas in the south. They've redrawn the Israeli border. You can't allow that. If you don't send, if the people are not allowed to go back, then they have gained territory
Correct.
as a result of this war, and that is, that's a victory for them. And if Israel wants to claim victory, then they have to go back, and that explains the pagers. That explains the walkie-talkies. It's not an escalation. It's a response to a year of indiscriminate rocket attacks. I mean,
Yeah.
there was a rocket attack that killed 12 Druze children. Nobody remembers their name.
Yeah.
Nobody, and they talk about these pager attacks killed 2 children. Of course, that's a tragic disaster
Yeah.
for those families. But But this, one attack killed 12 children. Nobody could. I bet you lots of people in Ireland could name the child who died in the pager attacks and saw the funeral on TV. Bet you people in America could name the child. No one could name any of the 12 Druze children who were blown up playing soccer on a pitch. Completely innocent. And these rockets, they're just rockets. There's no guidance system on
Yeah.
them. They're not finely tuned. It's so that explains the pager system. That explains the pager. That's the context, and it's important that people know this
Yeah.
and remember this started on October 7th,
Yes.
but it's still ongoing.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the play is about, is reminding people of exactly what happened that day, and with the voices of these 14 individuals, some of them connected, some of them not connected. But in a way, the miracle of the play is that it comes together so extraordinarily with these voices from different parts of the country, experiencing the worst day of their lives. Anyway, Phelim, you will be in Princeton, and you will be able to tell us all about it next week when you get back.
Yes.
But we're also going to we'll do a lot of recording, of people's reaction in Princeton. So we'll also bring that to you as soon as we can.
So yes, we're joined now by Fatima Gunning, who is a reporter with Gript Media in Ireland, to discuss Lettergate, or Poetgate, maybe perhaps it should be called, from our poet president. Welcome to the show, Fatima.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. We're very, very grateful, Fatima.
So, just to give people the background here, Fatima, it all began back in July when it was revealed in a British Jewish newspaper that the Irish president, Michael D. Higgins, the poet president, who's probably the most left-wing president Ireland has ever had written the most obsequiously toe-curling letter congratulating the Iranian president on his recent election. Just obsequiously awful. Best wishes for your endeavors. Very sad for the tragic circumstances of your coming to power and this opportunity to repeat the condolences of the people of Ireland for the death of your predecessor. The condolences for the Butcher of Tehran, the death of the Butcher of Tehran. Stability and cooperation and the peaceful resolving of disputes has never been more important, as if the Iranians would know anything about that. Very best wishes for your endeavors. We'll put the whole. We'll just put the whole letter up there on the screen. And at this difficult time, while we struggle for peace, and the reason we're struggling for peace, by the way, is because of the Iranians. Anyway, he sent this letter. It was splashed all over the media, and that obviously, and he was rightly lambasted for it. Now, he never really spoke publicly about it. Condolences for the Butcher of Tehran, who oversaw the execution of thousands of political prisoners, despised by most Iranians. But then the president of Ireland was speaking at the United Nations this week, and he made the mistake, I suppose, of giving a press conference and was asked about the letter. And true to form, from the most anti-Semitic, anti-Israeli country in Europe, the president blamed the Jews for leaking the letter. He said the Israeli embassy had somehow, because they're all powerful, had somehow found his letter and had leaked it. Now, that's not what happened, and it was widely reported at the time. The Iranian embassy themselves put it on their Twitter account and made it public, and it was seen there and reported. So tell us about the press conference and the fallout from it and the Irish president.
Well, the comments were made at the in New York at the United Nations, press opportunity. And if you watch the footage, there is about a 30-second clip that was captured by RTE. You see President Higgins, in a way, I think it's probably fair to say that he was goaded into saying it. Like, obviously, he's asked about the letter, and then he says, somebody says to him, like, well, who sent it, kind of thing, how did it get out? And then he goes, in a way, almost reluctantly, well, that's for you to find out. And then he just says, the journalist presses him and says, like, well, you sound like you know who leaked it. And then he goes, well, yeah, I mean, it was circulated by the Israeli embassy. So, I mean, obviously it was, as you said, it was shared on the Twitter of the Iranian embassy in Ireland, as well as their Department of Foreign Affairs website. which again is, quite widely known. So it was, I would say, a bit bizarre for him to then go and say that it was circulated by the Israeli embassy, and the Israeli embassy in Dublin have dismissed that as completely ridiculous and borderline libelous, I believe they said, and
Yes,
they've said it's
yes.
without foundation and rejected it completely. And since then, one of our independent senators, Jared Crockwell, has said that Higgins has, like, quote, lost the plot. So yeah, it was quite a strong statement from Senator Crockwell there.
But is Crockwell the only politician in Ireland to say something about this extraordinary claim by Michael D. Higgins that's verifiably false?
To my knowledge, I haven't heard anyone say anything big about it. Obviously, former Minister for Justice Alan Shatter, he has come out quite strongly against it. Like, in the wake of the original sending of the letter, he was extremely critical of not only Higgins writing it, but also of the Irish media. What he said, like, not picking up on it and not reporting it. Like, after the escalation about the accusation of circulating the letter, he said that the president needs to withdraw those comments immediately, and he expressed his disgust at the Iranian regime, which he said was basically funding global terrorism. Yeah, he it's on his Twitter. Like, he was extremely critical of not only what the president had said recently, but also of the sending of the letter itself.
What really got me, though, was this is a completely false attack on the Israelis, and it kind of lends itself to this trope that the Jews control the media, that the Jews are all powerful, that there's kind of their work in secret to cause chaos, and they're the cause of all the trouble. And it's a completely false and verified, not just verifiably, he would have known it to be false. Rather than, and by the way, the president of Ireland is like the Queen of England or the King of England. They're not supposed to have a political role. They're supposed to be above politics. They represent all of the people of Ireland. They represent Ireland, all opinions. So it is the most boring job in the world. You go and open community centres and train stations. You're not supposed to be talking about day-to-day politics. This president has decided that's for losers, and he's doing it. And rather than being chastised by the politicians, they're kind of supporting him in it. And Simon Harris said, "I have no interest whatsoever in getting into any sort of tit for tat with the Israeli embassy or the government of a country that's continuing to allow this horrific humanitarian situation continue, where children are dying on a daily basis." Um, and they're depriving people of humanitarian aid. So he's kind of blaming the Israelis, sort of saying they kind of deserved it, as opposed to slapping the president on the wrist, saying, "Stay out of politics, and if you're going to get to politics, get it right."
And it's an extraordinary thing. This is so bad enough that the president, who, as you said, is kind of it's a title that has no power in it apparently, and he's not meant to speak about politics. But this is the Prime Minister of Ireland. They call it Taoiseach in Ireland, doubling down in this extraordinary way. Have people picked up on what Simon Harris has said?
I think, in fairness to Simon Harris, when this arose about a month ago, he did make comments to my colleague Ben Scallon, where he was very reluctant to pin down whether or not the president's remarks were made on behalf of the people of Ireland, and he was obviously put in a bit of a between a rock and a hard place, because obviously it's sent from the president of Ireland,
Yes.
so on his paper, as it were, and
Yep.
so it's very hard to say he wasn't kind of taking a position on behalf of the Irish people. But I think this time I think he probably did a bit of a deflection tactic where, instead of saying, I completely stand over him sending that letter, he more or less kind of, I would say, he deflected it, and he kind of decided to focus on the humanitarian toll of the current war between Israel and Palestine, and he spoke about the numbers of children who had been killed, and he kind of played it that way, let's say. The deputy prime minister, who we call the Taoiseach, and he's also the minister for foreign affairs, Micheál Martin, he said that the letter was a standard letter. He didn't seem to think that there was, it was a big deal or anything. Obviously the Iranian regime, as you said, they're previously responsible for the deaths of like so many people. Obviously, I think the person that would be in most Irish people's minds now would be Massa Amini, who was killed after being arrested by the modesty police. So, it is a bit of a bizarre thing for a president to send congratulatory remarks to a brutal, oppressive regime.
Yeah, especially progressive Ireland that is so proud of itself. Well, we're not. There's no more, Catholic Church. And they often talk about the Catholic Church, the bishops of the Catholic Church, as being the mullahs. Well, there are real mullahs in this world enforcing modesty on women, and it's not like in the old days in Ireland where the bishop might, look askance at you, or the priest might, criticize you. This can have, you can go to jail and you can be murdered by the modesty police in Iran, and the Irish president wrote a letter, and rather than say, even by the way, if the Irish president got up and said, look, it's protocol. I have to do this. This is what you do. People would go, they understand. Everyone knows that's the world of diplomacy. But he's quite proud of the letter, and his only thing is that the Jews leaked it. That he Simon Harris deflected it onto the humanitarian aspect of the war. The president reflected it for a nice, juicy anti-Semitic trope about the Jews controlling the media.
I mean, yeah, it's a bit weird. I don't believe that the letter was actually shared on his presidential Twitter, so we may not have known about it, had it not been covered by that Jewish paper based in the UK that you mentioned.
I think this is very interesting. This idea that the letter was leaked. I mean, this isn't private correspondence. So, as you said earlier, actually, Fatima, this has the letterhead is from the president of Ireland. He's not writing as an individual, as a private citizen. He's writing on behalf of the Irish people, actually. And, so if there's nothing wrong with it, first of all, it should be public. So in the first instance, the fact that this was kind of a private and it was leaked, there's no secrets here. There shouldn't be any secrets here. And of course, what's really embarrassing is how obsequious he is, how over the top he is about their endeavours. I mean, I was just looking up some things about Iran, where the marital age for girls is 13, where women have to have their heads covered, as you say. That poor girl who was murdered, basically tortured to death because she didn't have the proper headgear on. I mean, this is, and he's talking about the hopes, your hopes and your endeavours, this incredible language. And this letter was published by the Iranian embassy in Ireland on their Twitter account at the time. There was no leak of anything, but it is interesting that it was kind of private.
Actually, Fatima, can you address that? Like, surely this letter was never going to be. I mean, this is a public letter by the. Shouldn't this letter have been public from the word
get-go?
Go? Like, from the get-go, is the president of Ireland writing private letters on government of Ireland letterhead to other despotic regimes?
Yeah.
I hope not, to be honest with you. But I mean, if he is, I'm sure they'll probably come out sooner or later. But I think it's interesting. The reaction of the Iranian embassy was to say, if I can just read it, this marks a promising beginning for the development of strong relationships between Ireland and Iran. So, I mean, when you're the figurehead of a country that wants to be the best boy in the class in terms of progressivism, might not want to write a congratulatory letter to the new president of the Iranian regime. I mean, I do think that official Ireland does have a bit of a blind spot when it comes to, Islamic extremism and calling out bad behavior overseas. I think they're very selective in what they will actually tackle. So I think this is probably kind of maybe a farcical example of that attitude.
Totally.
It's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I mean, we're going to keep in touch with you, Fatima, but I'm very curious to see where the fallout from this will go. I would guess it's gonna go absolutely nowhere. I mean, as you've just said yourself, I think one or two politicians have said something, and there's a whole heap of those politicians in Ireland, and they're all being very quiet about this scandal, this unbelievable scandal of basically saying the Jews did it. The Jews leaked this. It's an extraordinary thing from the president. Extraordinary. And then the fact that the prime minister isn't distancing himself from those remarks. Extraordinary.
Thank you very much, Fatima, for joining us. Yeah, you're right. It's this best boy in class, but actually, don't. And it's funny. There's this weird. It's the same in America too. There's this weird, almost like a love of the Iranian regime. Like it's like that bad boyfriend, you know. Like how many times do you have to be nasty to me before they walk away? Like the Obama regime, the Obama presidency could not love the Iranian regime too
More.
much.
Yeah.
The Biden, every time they get into power, when Biden got into power, first thing he did was uh, start the Iranian agreement that allowed them to get to use nuclear power and get nuclear weapons. No matter what the Iranians do and how many women they kill and what they do, there just seems to be this, as you say, a blind spot for the Iranians. So Ireland is, doing its best to be top of the class, as you say.
Yeah.
So Fatima, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so
Hope to have
much.
you on again, and talk to you soon.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
But that's basically our podcast for this week. A little bit different this week. Excuse any kind of technical difficulties, but we're working from a lot of different time zones here, and we're very very happy though that the play is getting to go on campuses, and the reaction from people has been extraordinary. I mean, the UCLA, there's huge numbers of people are trying to get tickets, and it's I think it might well be sold out, but I think they still have a wait list. But people are there's a hunger for this, and this gives me an opportunity before we just finish off to say to people, we really need your support to keep going. This is really important. This play is very, very powerful and can achieve more than any documentary, can achieve an enormous amount, particularly by bringing it on campuses across America. And we can only do that with your support. So if you've been thinking about supporting us, stop thinking and just do. And all you have to do is go to October7theplay.com, October7theplay.com. We'll put the link up there on the screen and give what you can. And all donations are tax deductible. And we do need support because it's an expensive endeavor. But we were just saying, it costs I don't know, more than $70,000 to bring this to a campus. However, if you think about it, speakers, so those more famous speakers, everyone knows their names, can be $50, $60, $70, $100,000, $150,000. So this is 14 actors, this is a director, this is stage props. This is a huge production actually. So in comparison to a speaker, this is actually brilliant value because of what it can achieve. We're going to close out then with the one clip here from October 7th, the play, with Shani's story. And we will see you next week.
There's an opening in the leaves that cast a ray of sunshine on me. The glitter on my face and jewelry catches the light, and I think it's really dangerous, so I start removing all my jewelry. I have a necklace, and on it is written, Vish Marak, the blessing of the priest Yevarak Adonai Vish Marak. The Lord will save you and will guard you. I'm not a religious person, but I really felt that I needed that protection. So I held it tight, and I started to pray. And suddenly I saw a bird flying. And the bird flew and landed on a branch close to my hand. And I don't know how to explain it or to describe the feeling, but I really felt that my grandfather of blessed memory was with me. When I got home later that night and told my mom, she told me the date my grandfather died, October 7th, 2016.